students. So in this class we discuss conservation of biodiversity. So in previous class you have seen different types of biodiversities, and so in this class we will see conservation, how we conserve the biodiversity. So coming with biodiversity, so biodiversity is nothing but life. Bio means life, diversity means variability or changes, variability or changes with regard to life, with regard to animals or plants and habitat. That is nothing but ecosystem. So biodiversity is says about the change in the variability in the life of animals or plants in which in a particular area they are living, that is habitat. So the changes, the variability may be in animals or plants and the habitat in which they are living, that is called as biodiversity. So if you see biodiversity, there are different biodiversities which due to variabilities, changes, due to some changes. So coming to the types, so first one is genome diversity. So genome diversity. So in genome diversity, so there will be differences in genome, either it may be sequence, either it may be content and more. So differences in genome. So the genome diversity which says about the differences in the genomic level. So the genomic level, so the differences may be because of changes in the sequence of the DNA or changes in the sequence of nucleotides and the changes in the amount of DNA, that is genome diversity. So from one species to other species 1 and species 2, so there will be change in the nucleotide. There will be change in the nucleotide sequence. So if you compare one nucleotide sequence of one species with the nucleotide sequence of other species, there will be change. So this change will create differences in the living organism, that is, which comes under genome diversity. Next one, second one is species diversity. So species diversity. So if you take an habitat, so habitat is nothing but the living area. So in a particular habitat, so there will be one species, reaching one species, that is called as niche. We call it as niche. So niche is an area of habitat. We can simply call it niche and habitat are same. So if you call it niche, it is says about the richness of a particular species. So if there is an area, so which is divided into different blocks. So block 1, 2, 3 and 4. So block 1 area is rich in, say for example, elephant. So this area is called as habitat. So this habitat is rich in elephants. So the elephant number will be more in this habitat. So this habitat is called as niche. This is called niche. So niche says about the richness of a species. So in an area, if you take an area 4, so this area, this habitat which contains elephants, lions, tigers and other species. So this we call as simple habitat. So this habitat which allows different species to live. So the species will be one species will differ from other species. So for example, if you take humans and animals, So humans, we have man, and animals we have, for example, dog. So this is a species, man is a species belongs to human, and dog is a species belongs to animal. So there will be difference in man and dog. So there are species of one animal, species of one belong different to other species. So species will be different from one species will be different from other species. That is species diversity. And next one is ecosystem diversity. Ecosystem diversity. So the variability in habitats, that is living areas. So different species will have different areas for their living areas. That is ecosystem diversity. So for example, if you take fish, so they have water as an habitat. If you see dog or animals, they adopt land as an habitat. So different species will adopt different habitats. That is ecosystem diversity. So coming to the conservation, because of threats which are concerned to the biodiversity because of overexploitation by humans, that leads to threats to biodiversity. So because of overexploitation, so the biodiversity is facing certain threats, certain damages. So whatever the biodiversity that are facing threats will be conserved, should be conserved in order to maintain the ecological balance. In order to maintain the ecological balance. So conservation is to maintain the ecological balance. So coming to the conservation, biodiversity, conservation, biodiversity conservation. We have in situ conservation, and ex situ conservation. In situ conservation and ex situ conservation. So we can adapt any of this method to conserve the species or habitat, either by in situ conservation or ex situ conservation. So in situ conservation is nothing but within the habitat. So we conserve the species or plant life where it is present, that is within the habitat. That is called as in situ regulation. Whereas coming to ex situ conservation, we take the threatened animal or plant to a safe place, to a different place or different habitat. That is called as ex situ conservation, that is out of the habitat. Out of the habitat. So conservation of the species, either plant or animal, where it is present, that is called as in situ conservation. So there is a natural place. Where it is born, where it is there, that is natural place, in situ conservation. Whereas in ex situ conservation, we will take the species, either plant or animal, from the natural place to the other habitat, which is called as ex situ conservation. So coming to the in situ conservation, we have different conservation methods. One is national parks, wildlife sanctuaries, biosphere reserves, and sacred forests, which comes under in situ conservation. Whereas ex situ conservation, which includes gene bank, seed bank, forestral gardens, botanical gardens, and zoos. So this comes under ex situ, this comes under ex situ conservation. So coming to the national parks, so these are the large protected areas without human entry. So national parks are meant for the wildlife which are be protected without entry of humans. That is called as national parks. Next, wildlife sanctuaries. So protected area for wildlife with limited human activity. That is called as wildlife sanctuaries, such as grazing will be used for this from the wildlife sanctuaries. Coming to biosphere, both wildlife and humans can live together, so without affecting each other. That is biosphere. Next, sacred forest. the areas with boundaries. The areas with boundaries in the forest, that is sacred forest. So these are the different in situ conservation methods which will protect the diversity of the animals or plants. So which includes national parks, wildlife sanctuaries, biosphere reserves, and sacred forests. Coming to the executive conservation, we have gene bank. In gene bank, we conserve the DNA. Seed bank, we conserve the seeds. So conservation of seeds of rare species. Botanical gardens. So these are the small protected areas with limited species of rare or extincted. And zoos for protecting animals. So executive conservation, which includes gene bank, so where we conserve the DNA. So DNA will be conserved of different species whenever the species is extended. So the DNA of the species will be used for further steps. That is gene bank. Next, seed bank. So seeds of the rare species will be stored. That is seed bank. Coming to botanical gardens. So these are the protected areas. Limited species or extincted species will be protected in the botanical gardens. Next, zoos. So animals will be protected in a closed environment. That is zoos. So this is about conservation of biotops. So what are the species which are facing threats? Threats because of over exploitation of humans. So this conservation is mainly to maintain the ecological balance, to maintain the balance. So coming to the types of biodiversity. So there are variabilities in different classes. So genome diversity. So the differences in the genome of one species to other species. So with regard to sequence or with regard to amount of the DNA. There is the differences in the genome which comes under genome diversity. So the nucleotide sequence of one genome will be slightly differ from species of other. That is genome diversity. So the genome diversity, the differences in the genome will rise to new species. That is genome diversity. Coming to the species diversity. So there will be species. One species will be different from other species living in the same habitat, same area. So if there's area which is rich in for a particular species, that is called as niche. So niche is an area which says about the richness of a particular species, that is niche. So if we see in habitat, so habitat is combination of different species. So there will be changes, there will be differences in the DNA, that is species to species. This comes under species diversity. Coming to the ecosystem diversity, so different species will have different habitats. So for fish, they will acquire water, they will use water as an habitat, whereas terrestrial animals, they use land as an habitat. So different species will use for different ecosystem. That comes under ecosystem diversity. Ecosystem diversity. So because of over-exploitation in the biodiversity, so it has to be conserved, it has to be saved. So for conservation of biodiversity, there are two methods. One is in situ conservation and other one is ex situ conservation. So in situ conservation, is a conservation of biodiversity within the habitat. Within the habitat, that is in situ conservation, which includes national parks, wildlife sanctuaries, biosphere reserves, sacred forests. So national parks is the largest protected areas without human activity. That is, so it is only meant for plants and animals. That is national parks. Wildlife sanctuaries, which are protected areas with a limited human activity. That is wildlife sanctuaries. Biospheres is combination of wildlife and humans without affecting each other. That is biosphere reserves. And sacred forests is the area with boundaries. The areas with the large boundaries is sacred forests. So which all this comes under in situ conservation. So in situ conservation is the conservation of biodiversity where it is, that is within the place, within the habitat. That is in situ conservation. So whereas coming to the ex situ conservation, so the plants, the species, the plants or animals which are facing threat, will brought to another place which is safe from its natural base. That is ex situ conservation, the conservation of the species outside of its own habitat. That is called as ex situ conservation. So which includes gene bank, seed bank, botanical gardens and zoos. So in gene bank, it is used to preserve the DNA. So different DNA of different species will be isolated and which will be stored in cold temperature. That is called as cryopreservation. Cryopreservation means storage of material in cold condition, that is about minus 180 degrees centigrade. So storage of DNA at minus 180 degrees, minus 80 to minus 180 degrees centigrade. So at low temperature the material will be stored. Coming to the seed banks, so the seeds of rare species will be collected and will be stored. So that is seed bank. Next, botanical gardens, which is nothing but protected areas with limited species which are extincted. So we will prepare small areas and where the extended species will be allowed to grow. And zoos is the protected areas for animals. So which comes under ex situ conservation. So we can conserve the biodiversity by either by in situ conservation or ex situ conservation. So this is about the conservation of biodiversity. So in conservation of biodiversity, we can conserve the genome diversity. We can take the genome DNA content and we can store in gene banks. And species diversity. Species either we can preserve either by in situ conservation or by ex situ conservation. In situ conservation or by ex situ conservation. And coming to the ecosystem diversity. So we can maintain or we can preserve, we can protect the ecosystem which is belong to different species. So this comes under ecosystem diversity. So these are the different types of diversity which has to be protected when they face threatened by the over-exploitation. That is over-exploitation by humans. So coming to the conservation, that is biodiversity conservation, we can get it by in situ conservation and ex situ conservation. So in situ conservation is within the habitat, within the same place, that is in situ conservation. Whereas ex situ conservation, so we take the species from the where they are facing threat, that is called as outside of the habitat, that is ex situ conservation. So in situ conservation we have national parks, wildlife sanctuaries, biospheres and sacred forests. Whereas in ex situ conservation we have gene bank, seed bank, botanical gardens and zoos. So these are about the biodiversity conservation, by which we can conserve the biodiversity which are facing threats by the over exploitation of humans. So with this we have completed biodiversity, conservation of biodiversity. Thank you.